Most people never fail because they're incapable. They fail because they quit. They quit when progress becomes invisible. They quit when motivation disappears. They quit when life becomes inconvenient. The truth is simple. Success does not belong to the smartest person. It does not belong to the most talented person. It belongs to the person who stays in the game longer than everyone else. This audiobook will teach you how to build a mind that does not retreat, does not negotiate with excuses, and does not stop when things get hard. Because once you become the person who never quits, your goals stop being dreams. They become inevitable. Chapter 1. Stop waiting to feel ready. Most people are waiting for confidence, waiting for certainty, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for a sign. And while they wait, life moves forward without them. Years pass, opportunities pass, potential passes, dreams slowly become regrets. Not because they lacked talent, not because they lacked intelligence, not because they lacked opportunity, but because they kept waiting to feel ready. And that's where most people lose. They lose before they even begin. They lose because they have convinced themselves that readiness is something that arrives, something that appears, something that magically shows up one morning and says, "Now you're prepared." But that's not how life works. That's not how success works. And that's certainly not how greatness works. Ready is not a feeling. Ready is a decision. Say it again. Ready is not a feeling. Ready is a decision. The people who accomplish extraordinary things are not the people who felt ready. They are the people who acted despite feeling unprepared. Think about it. Nobody feels ready to start a business. Nobody feels ready to stand on a stage. Nobody feels ready to write their first book. Nobody feels ready to make their first investment. Nobody feels ready to transform their life. The feeling never comes first. The action comes first. Yet millions of people spend years preparing for a life they never begin. They read another book, watch another video, take another course, make another plan, create another strategy, and none of it changes their life. Because preparation without execution becomes procrastination. Planning is valuable, but planning is not progress. Thinking is useful, but thinking is not action. You have a choice. You can spend another year preparing, or you can spend the next year building. One creates the illusion of movement. The other creates results. That's the key. The world rewards action, not intention, not potential, not promises. Action. There are people right now who know less than you, have fewer resources than you, and possess less talent than you. Yet they are moving ahead. Why? Because they started. While others were preparing, they were practicing. While others were doubting, they were learning. While others were waiting, they were building. Move first, believe later. That is how confidence is created. Most people think confidence produces action. The truth is the opposite. Action produces confidence. Confidence is not something you find. Confidence is something you earn. Every time you take action despite fear, you deposit evidence into your mind. Evidence that says, "I can handle this." Evidence that says, "I can learn." Evidence that says, "I can adapt." And little by little, confidence grows. Not before action, after action. Move first, believe later. Think about the entrepreneur who launches a business. The first day is uncertainty. The first sale is uncertainty. The first year is uncertainty. They don't know exactly what they're doing. They learn while moving. The athlete doesn't feel ready before stepping onto the field. The creator doesn't feel ready before publishing. The leader doesn't feel ready before leading. They learn while moving. And that's one of the biggest secrets successful people understand. They do not wait to become confident. They become confident because they move. Most people have this backwards. They say, "I'll start when I'm ready. I'll begin when I'm confident. I'll act when I'm sure." But readiness never arrives through waiting. Readiness arrives through doing. The first workout creates readiness for the second. The first speech creates readiness for the second. The first attempt creates readiness for the next attempt. Action is the teacher. Action is the training ground. Action is the classroom. That's the key. Life does not reward observers. Life rewards participants. And fear is often the reason people stay stuck. Let's talk about fear. Fear is normal. Fear is human. Fear is expected. The goal is not to eliminate fear. The goal is to stop obeying it. Because fear always tells the same story. It says you're not ready. It says you'll fail. It says you'll embarrass yourself. It says you should wait. But fear has one job: to keep you safe. The problem is that safety and growth rarely live in the same place. Growth requires uncertainty. Growth requires risk. Growth requires discomfort. You have a choice. You can obey fear and stay where you are. Or you can walk forward while fear follows behind you. That's what courageous people do. They are not fearless. They are committed. Fear says stop. Commitment says continue. Fear says wait. Commitment says move. Fear says you're not ready. Commitment says ready is not a feeling. Ready is a decision. Understand this clearly. The people you admire have felt fear. The successful entrepreneur felt fear. The champion athlete felt fear. The best-selling author felt fear. The great leader felt fear. The difference is not the absence of fear. The difference is action. They moved anyway. Move first, believe later. Every major transformation begins this way. A person decides to act before certainty arrives. A person decides to move before confidence appears. A person decides to begin before they feel prepared. And that single decision changes everything. Because motion creates momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief creates persistence. Persistence creates results. Results create transformation. But it all begins with movement. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Not when conditions improve. Now. Today. This moment. The person who never quits understands something powerful. Starting imperfectly is better than waiting perfectly. Because perfection is a trap. Perfection delays action. Perfection creates excuses. Perfection creates endless preparation. And endless preparation creates nothing. Done is better than perfect. Action is better than intention. Movement is better than waiting. You don't need their permission. You don't need universal approval. You don't need certainty. You need a decision. A decision to begin. A decision to move. A decision to stop waiting. Ready is not a feeling. Ready is a decision. Move first. Believe later. Repeat those words until they become part of your identity. Because the moment you stop waiting to feel ready is the moment your life starts moving in a different direction. The moment you stop negotiating with fear is the moment growth begins. The moment you act despite uncertainty is the moment you separate yourself from the crowd. Most people wait. You won't. Most people hesitate. You won't. Most people quit before they start. You won't. Because becoming the person who never quits starts with one simple choice. The choice to begin before you feel ready. You have taken the first step. Now it's time to learn what keeps you moving after the excitement fades. Because starting is important. but continuing is what changes lives. Chapter 2. Discipline beats motivation every time. Most people are addicted to motivation. They wait for it. They chase it. They depend on it. They watch videos for it, read quotes for it, listen to speeches for it. And for a few moments, they feel unstoppable. Then reality arrives. The feeling disappears. The energy fades. The excitement vanishes. And so does the action. That is why motivation alone never changes lives. Motivation is temporary. Motivation is emotional. Motivation is unreliable. And if your success depends on motivation, your success depends on something you cannot control. That's a dangerous way to live. Because motivation comes and goes. Some mornings you wake up energized. Some mornings you wake up exhausted. Some days you feel confident. Some days you feel uncertain. Some days you feel powerful. Some days you feel weak. Human emotions fluctuate. Human emotions change. Human emotions are unstable. That's normal. That's life. But successful people understand something most people never learn. Motivation is emotional weather. Discipline is infrastructure. Think about that. The weather changes every day. One day it's sunny. The next day it's storming. One day it's calm. The next day, it's chaotic. You cannot build your future on weather. You build your future on infrastructure. The bridge remains. The road remains. The foundation remains. Discipline remains. That's the key. Discipline works whether you feel like it or not. Discipline works when you're excited. Discipline works when you're tired. Discipline works when you're inspired. Discipline works when you're discouraged. Motivation starts. Discipline finishes. Say it again. Motivation starts. Discipline finishes. The gym is full every January. People are motivated. People are inspired. People are excited. Then February arrives. The motivation begins to fade. March arrives. The enthusiasm disappears. By the middle of the year, most people have quit. Not because their goal was impossible, not because they lacked potential, because they built their commitment on emotion. And emotions change. You have a choice. You can build your life on feelings, or you can build your life on discipline. One is unstable, one is dependable, one disappears, one remains. That's the difference. The person who never quits does not ask, "Do I feel motivated?" They ask, "What needs to be done?" Then they do it. Simple, powerful, effective. Consider the professional athlete. People see the championships, the trophies, the victories. But what they don't see is the routine, the daily practice, the early mornings, the repetition, the countless sessions when motivation was absent. Champions don't train because they feel inspired. Champions train because that's what they do. It's not about emotion, it's about execution. It's not about feeling, it's about discipline. That's the key. The same principle applies everywhere. The entrepreneur who builds a successful company, the writer who finishes a book, the musician who masters an instrument, the investor who creates wealth, the leader who earns trust. They all rely on the same secret: consistency. Not intensity, consistency. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. Why? Because they chase intense bursts of motivation instead of steady discipline. They work hard for 3 days, then disappear for 3 weeks. They push themselves for 1 weekend, then abandon the process. They keep starting over, and every restart costs them momentum. You have a choice. You can keep restarting, or you can keep continuing. The second option wins every time. Imagine two people. One person works 10 hours in a single day and then quits for a month. The other person works 1 hour every day for a month. Who wins? The second person. Always. Because consistency compounds. Small actions repeated daily become extraordinary results. That's how success is built. Not through dramatic moments, through repeated behaviors. Motivation starts. Discipline finishes. Most people want transformation. Few people want routine. But routine is where transformation lives. The workout you almost skipped, the page you almost didn't write, the call you almost didn't make, the task you almost postponed. Those moments matter. Because every time you follow through, you strengthen your identity. You reinforce the belief that you are someone who keeps going, someone who follows through, someone who finishes. And that identity becomes powerful, very powerful. Because once discipline becomes part of who you are, success becomes much easier. You stop debating with yourself. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop asking whether you feel like it. You simply execute. That's the key. Discipline eliminates unnecessary decisions. A disciplined person doesn't wake up and wonder whether they'll work toward their goal. The decision was made long ago. The routine handles it. The system handles it. The habit handles it. That is freedom. Many people believe discipline is restrictive. The opposite is true. Discipline creates freedom. Financial discipline creates financial freedom. Physical discipline creates health freedom. Mental discipline creates emotional freedom. Professional discipline creates career freedom. Without discipline, you become a servant to your impulses. With discipline, you become the architect of your future. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need endless motivation. You need structure. You need standards. You need habits. That's what carries you forward when emotions disappear. Because emotions will disappear. Every goal becomes difficult eventually. Every dream becomes boring eventually. Every pursuit becomes repetitive eventually. And that's where most people quit. Not when things are impossible, when things become ordinary. The person who never quits understands this. They expect boredom. They expect resistance. They expect difficult days. And because they expect them, they aren't surprised by them. They keep moving, while others stop. They keep showing up, while others disappear. They keep working, while others wait for motivation. That's why they win. Not because they are superhuman, not because they are special, because they are disciplined. Remember this whenever you don't feel like doing the work. Your feelings are temporary. Your future is permanent. Your mood is temporary. Your habits are permanent. Your motivation is temporary. Your discipline can last a lifetime. You have a choice. Follow your emotions, or lead them. Wait for motivation, or build discipline. Depend on inspiration, or depend on commitment. One path creates excuses. The other path creates results. And if your goal is to become the person who never quits, there is only one path that works. Discipline. The willingness to act when motivation is absent. The willingness to continue when excitement disappears. The willingness to keep going when nobody is watching. Motivation starts. Discipline finishes. Never forget that. Because the people who accomplish extraordinary things are rarely the most motivated. They are the most consistent. And consistency is simply discipline repeated over time. You have learned how to stop waiting for motivation. Now you must learn something even more important. Because discipline becomes easier when you stop resisting discomfort. And that's exactly what most people struggle with. They run from pain. They avoid difficulty. They expect growth without sacrifice. The person who never quits learns the opposite lesson. They learn that discomfort is not the enemy. It is the pathway. Chapter 3. Accept that the journey will hurt. Most people are not defeated by failure. They are defeated by discomfort. They start a goal. They feel excited. They feel motivated. They imagine success. And then reality arrives. The work becomes repetitive. The progress becomes slow. The excitement fades. The discomfort begins. And suddenly they think something is wrong. They assume they chose the wrong goal. They assume they are not talented enough. They assume they are not meant for success. But the truth is much simpler. Nothing is wrong. They are simply experiencing the part of the journey that everyone experiences. The painful part, the uncomfortable part, the part nobody talks about, the part that separates dreamers from achievers. Because growth is uncomfortable, always has been, always will be. Pain is not the signal to stop. Pain is often the signal that growth has begun. Read that again. Pain is not the signal to stop. Pain is often the signal that growth has begun. Most people expect progress to feel good. That expectation destroys them. They believe success should feel exciting every day. They believe transformation should feel inspiring every day. They believe growth should feel rewarding every day. It doesn't. In reality, growth often feels frustrating. Growth often feels inconvenient. Growth often feels exhausting. Growth often feels invisible. That's the key. The problem is not the pain. The problem is the expectation. People quit because reality does not match their fantasy. They expected confidence. They found uncertainty. They expected momentum. They found resistance. They expected results. They found struggle. And because the struggle surprised them, they interpreted it as failure. But struggle is not failure. Struggle is evidence that you are doing something difficult, and difficult things create extraordinary outcomes. You have a choice. You can run from discomfort, or you can learn from it. One path keeps you weak. The other path makes you stronger. Every meaningful achievement demands a price. Every single one. There is no exception. The athlete pays through training. The entrepreneur pays through risk. The writer pays through rejection. The leader pays through responsibility. The investor pays through patience. The student pays through discipline. Nobody escapes the cost. Nobody receives greatness without sacrifice. The question is not whether you will pay. The question is what you are willing to pay for. That's the key, because you're already suffering. Everyone is. The person who avoids exercise suffers poor health. The person who exercises suffers effort. The person who avoids responsibility suffers regret. The person who accepts responsibility suffers pressure. The person who avoids growth suffers stagnation. The person who pursues growth suffers discomfort. Choose your pain. You have a choice: temporary discomfort or long-term regret. One lasts a moment, the other lasts years. The strongest people understand this. They stop asking, "How can I avoid pain?" and start asking, "Which pain leads somewhere worthwhile?" That question changes everything. Pain is not the signal to stop. Pain is often the signal that growth has begun. Consider the first day in a gym. Your muscles ache. Your body complains. Everything feels difficult. But nobody interprets sore muscles as failure. Why? Because they understand the process. The discomfort is expected. The discomfort is evidence. The discomfort means adaptation is occurring. Yet when it comes to goals, careers, relationships, and personal growth, people forget this lesson. The moment emotional discomfort appears, they panic. The moment uncertainty appears, they retreat. The moment boredom appears, they quit. But growth follows the same principle. The discomfort is part of the adaptation. The discomfort is part of the transformation. The discomfort is part of becoming someone new. That's the key. And let's talk about boredom. Because boredom destroys more dreams than failure. Most people can handle difficulty for a day. Some can handle it for a week. Very few can handle months of repetition, months of routine, months of invisible progress, months of doing the same thing over and over again. Yet that is exactly what success requires. The champion practices fundamentals, again and again and again. The entrepreneur solves problems, again and again and again. The writer writes pages, again and again and again. There is nothing glamorous about mastery. There is repetition, there is routine, there is boredom, and there is discipline. It's not about excitement. It's about consistency. It's not about inspiration. It's about endurance. That's the key. Most people underestimate how boring excellence can be. And because they underestimate it, they abandon the process. They chase novelty. They chase shortcuts. They chase easier paths. And they start over repeatedly. Meanwhile, the disciplined person keeps moving. One step, then another, then another. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, just consistent effort. Day after day, week after week, month after month. And eventually, the results appear. Not because they were special, because they stayed, because they endured, because they accepted the pain. Pain is not the signal to stop. Pain is often the signal that growth has begun. Remember that when progress feels slow. Remember that when results are delayed. Remember that when nobody notices your effort. Remember that when the work becomes repetitive. Those moments matter. Those moments shape you, because resilience is not built during easy seasons. Resilience is built during difficult ones. Strength is not built during comfort. Strength is built during resistance. Character is not built when life goes your way. Character is built when it doesn't. You don't need their permission. You don't need constant encouragement. You don't need perfect circumstances. You need the ability to stay committed when things become uncomfortable. That is what separates people who finish from people who quit. Anyone can move forward when everything feels good. Anyone can stay motivated when results are immediate. Anyone can feel confident when success is guaranteed. But the person who never quits keeps moving when none of those things exist. That person becomes unstoppable. Not because they enjoy pain, because they understand it, they recognize it, they expect it, they refuse to be surprised by it. You have a choice. Treat discomfort as a warning, or treat discomfort as part of the process. One interpretation creates fear, the other creates growth. One interpretation creates excuses, the other creates resilience. The person who never quits chooses growth. Every time. Because they know something most people never learn. The journey was never supposed to be easy. The struggle was never supposed to disappear. The discomfort was never supposed to leave. Those things are not obstacles. They are part of the path. And once you accept that truth, you stop fighting reality. You stop expecting comfort. You stop demanding convenience. You stop searching for easy. And you start becoming stronger. That's the key, because the moment you stop resisting discomfort is the moment discomfort loses its power over you. The moment you accept the cost is the moment you become willing to pay it. And the moment you become willing to pay the price is the moment your goals become achievable. You have learned that pain is not your enemy. You have learned that discomfort is not a warning sign. You have learned that growth and struggle travel together. Now it's time to confront something even more dangerous. Because many people know what they should do. Many people understand the process. Many people recognize the path. Yet they still don't move forward. Why? Because they listen to a voice that constantly gives them permission to quit. The voice of excuses. And if you want to become the person who never quits, you must learn how to silence it. Chapter 4. Stop negotiating with your excuses. Every person who quits tells themselves a story. A story that sounds reasonable. A story that feels justified. A story that explains why they cannot continue. The story changes, but the result stays the same. The goal gets abandoned. The dream gets delayed. The potential remains unrealized. And the most dangerous part? Most excuses do not sound like excuses. They sound like logic. They sound responsible. They sound intelligent. That's why they are so powerful. If excuses sounded ridiculous, nobody would believe them. But excuses are persuasive because they sound reasonable. That's the trap. The mind is always looking for an escape route. Always. When the work becomes difficult, the mind offers an excuse. When the process becomes uncomfortable, the mind offers an excuse. When progress becomes slow, the mind offers an excuse. The excuse appears as relief, a way out, a justification, a reason to stop. And if you are not careful, you will mistake that excuse for truth. That's the key. Your excuses do not care about your future. Say that again. Your excuses do not care about your future. They care about your comfort. They care about avoiding discomfort. They care about escaping effort. They care about making today easier. But they never make tomorrow better. You have a choice. Listen to your excuses, or listen to your goals. You cannot follow both. One moves you forward. The other keeps you where you are. Let's talk about one of the most common excuses in the world. I don't have enough time. At first, it sounds reasonable. Many people are busy. Many people have responsibilities. Many people have obligations. But often, lack of time is not the real problem. Lack of priority is. That's the key. People make time for what matters. They always do. The person who says they don't have time to exercise may spend hours scrolling through social media. The person who says they don't have time to learn may spend hours consuming entertainment. The person who says they don't have time to pursue a dream may spend years avoiding it. The issue is rarely time. The issue is allocation. You have 24 hours. So does everyone else. The difference is how those hours are used. Your excuses do not care about your future. Another common excuse sounds like this. I'm not confident enough. Again, it sounds reasonable. But confidence is not a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the result of action. We talked about this earlier. Nobody begins with certainty. Nobody begins fully prepared. Nobody begins without doubt. The successful move anyway. The unsuccessful wait for confidence. And confidence never arrives, because confidence is earned through experience. Not imagination, not preparation. Experience. You have a choice. Wait until you feel confident, or become confident through action. One path creates delay, the other creates growth. That's the key. Then there is the excuse of opportunity. People say, I didn't have the right connections. I wasn't given the right chance. I wasn't born into the right situation. And yes, life is not equally fair. Some people begin with advantages. Others do not. That is reality. But reality does not change the question. What will you do with what you have? Because focusing on what you lack never improves what you possess. The person who never quits works with the cards they have, not the cards they wish they had. They focus on action, not comparison. They focus on progress, not resentment. They focus on solutions, not excuses. Your excuses do not care about your future. Remember that. Excuses are experts at protecting the present. Goals are experts at building the future. And those two forces are constantly competing inside you. Every day, every decision, every opportunity. The excuse says, skip today. The goal says, show up. The excuse says, start next week. The goal says, start now. The excuse says, you're not ready. The goal says, learn while moving. You have a choice. Which voice will you strengthen? Because every excuse you accept becomes easier to accept next time. And every excuse you reject becomes easier to reject next time. That is how habits are formed. Not in dramatic moments, in ordinary decisions. The decision to continue. The decision to follow through. The decision to keep your word to yourself. That's the key. And let's be honest. Most excuses are simply fear wearing a disguise. Fear of failure. Fear of embarrassment. Fear of rejection. Fear of uncertainty. But fear rarely introduces itself honestly. Instead, it disguises itself as practicality. It disguises itself as caution. It disguises itself as logic. And if you are not aware of this, fear will quietly control your life, without you even realizing it. The person who never quits learns to recognize the disguise. They learn to ask an important question. Is this a genuine obstacle or a convenient excuse? That question changes everything, because real obstacles require solutions. Excuses require surrender, and those are not the same thing. Let's say you truly lack time, then build a smaller habit. Let's say you truly lack money, then build skills. Let's say you truly lack confidence, then gain experience. Real obstacles can be addressed. Excuses only create stagnation. It's not about circumstances. It's about responsibility. It's not about perfection. It's about persistence. It's not about having everything. It's about using what you have. That's the key. The strongest people in the world are not the people with the fewest problems. They are the people who refuse to let problems become excuses. Think about that. Everyone has challenges. Everyone has setbacks. Everyone has reasons to stop. The difference is what they do next. One person sees difficulty and quits. Another person sees difficulty and adapts. One person sees resistance and retreats. Another person sees resistance and grows stronger. One person negotiates with excuses. Another person negotiates with solutions. That difference changes everything. You don't need their permission. You don't need ideal conditions. You don't need perfect timing. You need ownership. You need accountability. You need the willingness to look in the mirror and say, "My future is my responsibility." That statement is powerful, because the moment you take responsibility, you take control. And control creates action. Action creates progress. Progress creates momentum. Momentum creates results. Results create transformation. But it begins with responsibility, not excuses. responsibility. Your excuses do not care about your future. They never have. They never will. Your future belongs to your actions, your habits, your choices, your persistence. The person who never quits understands this deeply. They stop asking why something is difficult. They start asking how they can continue. They stop looking for reasons to quit. They start looking for ways to proceed. They stop negotiating with excuses. And they start building solutions. You have a choice. Every day, every hour, every moment. Listen to the voice that seeks comfort, or listen to the voice that seeks growth. One will keep you where you are. The other will take you where you want to go. That's the key. Because excuses are comfortable in the moment, but expensive in the long run. And every dream has a price. The question is whether you will pay with effort now or regret later. The person who never quits chooses effort, again and again, because they understand that excuses never create results. Action does. And once you stop negotiating with excuses, something remarkable happens. You become harder to stop, stronger, more resilient, more committed. But there is still one challenge left. Even when you stop making excuses, you will still experience setbacks. You will still fail. You will still make mistakes. You will still fall short. And if you want to become truly unstoppable, you must learn how to respond to failure itself. Because failure is not the enemy. Avoiding it is. Chapter 5. Make failure your training partner. Most people fear failure more than they fear regret. And that is exactly why they stay stuck. They avoid risks. They avoid challenges. They avoid opportunities. They avoid growth. Not because they lack potential, because they are trying to avoid failure. The irony is that the very thing they are trying to avoid is the thing they need most. Failure. Not as an ending, not as a verdict, not as proof that they are incapable, but as a teacher, a trainer, a guide. The person who never quits understands something that most people never learn. Failure is feedback. That's the key. Failure is feedback. Nothing more, nothing less. The problem is that most people make failure mean something it was never meant to mean. A failed business becomes proof they are not entrepreneurial. A failed relationship becomes proof they are unlovable. A failed project becomes proof they are not talented. A failed attempt becomes proof they should stop trying. But failure never says those things. People say those things. Failure simply provides information. Information about what worked. Information about what didn't. Information about what needs to improve. That's all. Fail, learn, adjust, continue. Say it again. Fail, learn, adjust, continue. That is the formula. That is the process. That is how every successful person moves forward. Not by avoiding failure, by using it. Think about a child learning to walk. Nobody expects perfection. Nobody expects immediate success. The child falls again and again and again. Yet nobody says, maybe walking isn't for you. Nobody says, you failed 3 times. You should quit. Nobody says, this proves you're incapable. Why? Because everyone understands the process. Falling is part of learning. Failure is part of mastery. Somehow, as adults, we forget this lesson. We expect ourselves to succeed immediately. We expect ourselves to perform flawlessly. We expect ourselves to avoid mistakes. And when reality doesn't match those expectations, we become discouraged. You have a choice. You can treat failure as evidence that you should stop, or you can treat failure as information that helps you improve. One creates weakness. The other creates growth. That's the key. Consider the great inventor. Before creating something revolutionary, there are failed experiments, hundreds of them, sometimes thousands. The inventor does not see those attempts as wasted effort. They see them as data. Each failure eliminates a wrong path. Each mistake reveals a better approach. Each setback moves them closer to success. That mindset changes everything. The athlete understands this too. The athlete loses games, misses shots, makes mistakes, performs poorly. But elite performers do not allow failure to define them. They study it, analyze it, learn from it, and return stronger. Fail, learn, adjust, continue. That is the pattern. The leader follows the same principle. Every great leader has made bad decisions. Every great leader has experienced criticism. Every great leader has faced setbacks. But leadership is not the absence of mistakes. Leadership is the ability to learn from mistakes and continue. The person who never quits develops this relationship with failure. They stop taking it personally. That's important, very important, because failure feels painful when it attacks your identity. If you believe failure means you are a failure, every setback becomes devastating. But if you understand failure as feedback, every setback becomes useful. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about making improvements. It's not about never falling. It's about always getting back up. That's the key. Most people focus on outcomes. Winners focus on lessons. Most people ask, "Why did this happen to me?" Winners ask, "What can this teach me?" Most people become emotional. Winners become curious. That shift is powerful because curiosity creates growth. Ego creates stagnation. The ego wants to protect itself. The ego wants to avoid embarrassment. The ego wants to avoid looking foolish. Growth doesn't care about any of that. Growth requires honesty. Growth requires humility. Growth requires the willingness to say, "I need to improve." And improvement always begins with truth. You have a choice. Protect your ego or improve your performance. Protect your pride or improve your results. One feels comfortable, the other creates transformation. That's the key. Let's talk about something else. Failure often arrives before success because failure builds capability. Think about that. Success requires skills. Success requires wisdom. Success requires resilience. Success requires judgment. And those qualities are rarely developed through easy victories. They are developed through challenges, through mistakes, through setbacks, through failures. The very experiences most people try to avoid are often the experiences that prepare them for success. Painful, but true. The entrepreneur learns through failed ideas. The athlete learns through losses. The writer learns through rejected manuscripts. The salesperson learns through hearing no. The investor learns through bad decisions. The leader learns through mistakes. Failure is not interrupting the process. Failure is part of the process. That's the key. The person who never quits accepts this reality. They stop asking for a smoother path. They stop expecting perfection. They stop demanding certainty. Instead, they commit to learning. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every mistake becomes a teacher. Every failure becomes training. And training creates strength. You don't need their permission. You don't need everyone's approval. You don't need a perfect record. You need resilience. You need adaptability. You need the willingness to keep moving after disappointment. because disappointment is inevitable. Failure is inevitable. Setbacks are inevitable. But quitting is optional, always. Remember that. Failure is an event. Quitting is a decision. Failure happens. Quitting is chosen. You have a choice. Fail and stop. Or fail and learn. Fail and retreat. Or fail and adjust. Fail and surrender. Or fail and continue. Only one path leads to growth. Fail, learn, adjust, continue. Those 4 words can change your life because they remove the fear surrounding failure. They remind you that every setback contains value. They remind you that mistakes are temporary. They remind you that progress is still possible. The person who never quits does not fear failure. They fear wasted lessons. They fear repeating the same mistake without learning from it. They fear staying the same. And because they embrace learning, they become stronger with every setback. Not weaker, stronger. That's the key. Every challenge becomes training. Every obstacle becomes preparation. Every failure becomes fuel. Eventually, something remarkable happens. Failure loses its power. You stop seeing it as an enemy. You start seeing it as part of the journey. And once that happens, you become incredibly difficult to stop. Because nothing can permanently defeat someone who refuses to stop learning. You have learned how to transform failure into feedback. You have learned how to use setbacks as training. You have learned how to continue when others quit. But there is another skill that separates the persistent from the average. A skill that seems simple, but changes everything. The ability to keep doing the same valuable actions long after the excitement disappears. Because success is rarely built through dramatic breakthroughs. It is built through repetition. Chapter 6. Fall in love with repetition. Most people are searching for a breakthrough, a secret, a shortcut, a hidden strategy that will suddenly transform their lives. They believe success is hidden in something new, something exciting, something different. But the truth is much less exciting and much more powerful. The people who achieve extraordinary results are usually not masters of novelty. They are masters of repetition. That's the key. The magic is in the repetition. Say it again. The magic is in the repetition. Most people underestimate how boring excellence really is. They see the championship. They don't see the thousands of practice sessions. They see the successful business. They don't see the years of consistent effort. They see the finished book. They don't see the countless hours spent writing. They see the result. They don't see the repetition. And that misunderstanding causes people to quit. Because when the excitement fades and the repetition begins, they assume something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. The repetition is the process. The repetition is the path. The repetition is the reason success eventually arrives. The magic is in the repetition. Think about the greatest athletes in the world. They don't become elite by constantly doing new things. They master the fundamentals, over and over again. The same movements, the same drills, the same techniques, day after day, year after year. The average person gets bored. The elite performer gets better. That's the difference. One seeks entertainment. The other seeks mastery. You have a choice. Chase excitement or chase excellence. One feels good temporarily. The other changes your life permanently. That's the key. Most people quit because they mistake boredom for a problem. They believe they should always feel inspired, always feel energized, always feel passionate. But passion is unreliable. Repetition is reliable. And reliable actions create reliable results. Consider someone trying to get healthy. They often search for the perfect workout, the perfect diet, the perfect routine. But health is rarely built through perfection. Health is built through repetition. Walking every day, making better food choices consistently, getting enough sleep regularly. Simple actions, repeated long enough. That's where the transformation occurs. The magic is in the repetition. The same principle applies to wealth. People search for a lucky break, a perfect opportunity, a single investment that changes everything. But wealth is usually built through repeated decisions, saving consistently, investing consistently, learning consistently, improving consistently. Simple habits, repeated over time, that's the key. Success is often less dramatic than people imagine, and more repetitive than they expect. The person who never quits understands this. They stop chasing dramatic moments. They start respecting daily habits, because habits are where results come from. Not inspiration, not motivation. Habits. Think about what repetition really does. Every repetition strengthens something: a skill, a belief, a habit, an identity. Every repetition casts another vote for the person you are becoming. Every workout says, I am someone who takes care of my body. Every page written says, I am someone who creates. Every hour spent learning says, I am someone who improves. Every act of discipline reinforces identity. And identity is powerful, very powerful. Because once something becomes part of who you are, consistency becomes easier. It's not about motivation, it's about identity. It's not about talent, it's about discipline. It's not about intensity, it's about repetition. That's the key. The greatest mistake people make is expecting immediate results. They repeat something for a few days, a few weeks, maybe a month. Then they look around and ask, why hasn't my life changed? The answer is simple. Because repetition requires patience. Seeds do not become trees overnight. Muscles do not develop overnight. Skills do not develop overnight. Trust does not develop overnight. Everything meaningful takes time. And time only works when repetition is present. The magic is in the repetition. Let's talk about compound growth, because repetition creates compounding effects. The first workout may not change your body. The second workout may not change your body. The 10th workout may not change your body. But eventually, the results become visible. The same is true for learning. The same is true for business. The same is true for relationships. Small actions seem insignificant at first. Then they become unstoppable. That's the power of repetition. Most people quit before the compound effect arrives. That is why they never experience the rewards. The person who never quits stays long enough. Long enough for the habits to work. Long enough for the skills to develop. Long enough for the results to appear. You have a choice. Judge the process too early, or trust the process long enough to see what it can produce. One creates frustration. The other creates achievement. That's the key. And let's be honest, repetition is not glamorous. Nobody applauds your daily discipline. Nobody celebrates your ordinary consistency. Nobody gives awards for showing up every day, at least not at first. The rewards come later, much later, after months, after years, after enough repetitions have accumulated. That is why so few people succeed. They want immediate recognition, immediate results, immediate proof. The person who never quits understand something different. They understand that today's repetition becomes tomorrow's achievement. So they keep going, even when nobody notices, even when progress feels invisible, even when the process feels boring, because they know something others forget. The magic is in the repetition. You don't need their permission. You don't need constant validation. You don't need immediate rewards. You need commitment. Commitment to showing up. Commitment to doing the work. Commitment to repeating the fundamentals again and again and again. That's how greatness is built. Not through rare moments of brilliance, through ordinary moments repeated consistently. The world often celebrates dramatic victories, but dramatic victories are usually the result of quiet repetition. Years of repetition, thousands of repetitions, millions of repetitions. What appears sudden is rarely sudden. It is accumulated effort finally becoming visible. That's the key. When you understand this, you stop chasing shortcuts. You stop searching for hacks. You stop looking for easier ways. Instead, you focus on the fundamentals. You focus on consistency. You focus on repetition. And eventually, repetition begins working for you. The habit becomes automatic. The discipline becomes natural. The effort becomes part of who you are. That is where real power exists, not in occasional bursts of effort, in sustainable consistency. The magic is in the repetition. Remember that when the work feels boring. Remember that when the progress feels slow. Remember that when the results seem invisible. Those are not signs to stop. Those are signs to continue, because every repetition is building something. Every repetition is strengthening something. Every repetition is preparing you for something. And one day, the results will arrive. Not because you were lucky, not because you were gifted, because you stayed, because you repeated, because you continued. That is what the person who never quits does. They understand that excellence is not an event. It is a habit built through repetition, a habit repeated long enough to become identity. And identity is the foundation of everything. Which brings us to the next chapter. Because repetition becomes permanent when it is connected to something deeper than goals, something deeper than motivation, something deeper than results. Identity. The person you believe yourself to be. And once you change that, everything changes. Chapter 7. Build an identity that cannot quit. Most people focus on goals. They focus on outcomes. They focus on achievements. They focus on results. And there is nothing wrong with goals. Goals provide direction. Goals create clarity. Goals help you aim. But goals alone are not enough, because goals tell you where you want to go. Identity determines whether you get there. That's the key. Behavior follows identity. People act according to who they believe they are. Think about that. Every day, whether you realize it or not, your actions are influenced by your self-image. A person who sees themselves as healthy makes different decisions than someone who doesn't. A person who sees themselves as disciplined behaves differently than someone who doesn't. A person who sees themselves as reliable acts differently than someone who doesn't. Identity drives behavior, and behavior creates results. Most people have it backwards. They say, when I become successful, I'll feel successful. When I achieve my goal, I'll become confident. When I reach the destination, I'll become the person I want to be. But transformation works in the opposite direction. First, you become the person. Then the results follow. That's the key. The person who never quits understands this. They stop saying, "I want success," and start saying, "I am someone who finishes." That simple shift changes everything, because wanting success is an external goal. Being someone who finishes is an identity, and identity is far more powerful. You have a choice. Build your life around goals, or build your life around identity. Goals can motivate. Identity can transform. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. That's the difference. Most people quit because quitting matches their identity. They may not say it out loud, but deep down they believe things like, "I'm inconsistent. I never follow through. I always start and stop. I lack discipline." Those beliefs become instructions. The mind works hard to remain consistent with its identity. If you believe you are inconsistent, you will unconsciously create inconsistency. If you believe you never finish, you will unconsciously avoid finishing. That's why changing behavior without changing identity rarely lasts. The root problem remains untouched. The person who never quits attacks the root. They build a new identity. One decision at a time, one action at a time, one promise kept at a time, and eventually a new belief forms. I am someone who finishes. I am someone who follows through. I am someone who keeps going. I don't quit because quitting is not who I am. Say those words. I don't quit because quitting is not who I am. Again. I don't quit because quitting is not who I am. That statement is powerful because it changes the conversation. Instead of debating whether you feel like doing the work, you ask a different question. What would someone like me do? A disciplined person trains. So you train. A reliable person follows through. So you follow through. A persistent person continues. So you continue. The decision becomes easier because the identity is clear. That's the key. Every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every workout is a vote. Every page written is a vote. Every difficult conversation is a vote. Every promise kept is a vote. And the more votes you cast, the stronger the identity becomes. Most people wait until they feel different before acting different. Winners act different before they feel different. That is how identities are built. Not through thinking, through evidence. Your brain believes what it sees repeatedly. Show it evidence. You want to become disciplined? Practice discipline. You want to become resilient? Practice resilience. You want to become someone who never quits? Keep going when quitting feels easier. That's the key. The identity comes from the evidence, not the other way around. Many people underestimate how much power identity has over their lives. Consider someone who identifies as a runner. They do not constantly debate whether they should run. Running is part of who they are. Consider someone who identifies as a reader. Reading becomes natural. Consider someone who identifies as a professional. Professional behavior becomes expected. Identity simplifies action. Identity removes unnecessary negotiation. And that is exactly what you need if you want to become unstoppable. Because every time you negotiate with yourself, you create an opportunity to quit. The person who never quits reduces negotiation. They create standards, and standards become identity. You have a choice. Live according to your moods, or live according to your standards. One changes daily. The other remains steady. One